Welcome to Learn with Roblox. In today's video, we're going to talk about problems dealing with averages and how to solve them. In this first problem, we have to find the average of the numbers 2, 10, 7, and 9. So remember, the formula for an average is basically the sum of all the numbers divided by how many numbers there are. So let's apply that in this problem. So first we need to find the sum of all those numbers. That's just 2 plus 10 plus 7 plus 9. And then we're going to divide by how many numbers there are. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 numbers in this data set. So just divide by 4. And then 2 plus 10 plus 7 plus 9. If you simplify all that, that's just 28. And then 28 divided by 4 is just 7. So therefore, the average is 7 in this problem. Let's try a harder problem. This one says, my friends and I just love chocolate chip cookies, maybe too much. My friends ate 21, 19, 10, and 8 chocolate chip cookies. I ate X cookies. If the average number of cookies eaten per person was 18, how many did I eat? So to do this problem, let's set up the formula for the average again. Remember, it's just the numbers summed up divided by how many numbers there are. So let's do that. Let's first sum up all the numbers of cookies that I've eaten, that I and my friends have eaten. So that's 21 plus 19 plus 10 plus 8 and then plus X, because we don't know how many cookies I ate. And we have to divide by the total number of numbers there are. Here there's 5 numbers, 21, 19, 10, 8, and X. And what do we know about this? We know that this is equal to 18. And now we have set up an equation that we can use to solve for X. So to solve this equation, let's multiply both sides by 5 to get rid of the 5 in the denominator. So here the 5's cancel out, and you're left with 21 plus 19 plus 10 plus 8 plus X. And 5 times 18 is just 90. Let's simplify this. 21 plus 19 plus 10 plus 8, if you do all that, that's just 58. So 90 equals 58 plus X. And then to solve for X, just subtract 58. And if you do that, you should get that X is equal to 32. So in other words, I ate 32 chocolate chip cookies. Okay, maybe that's a bit too much for one day. In this problem, it says that 6 students get an average of 89% on a test. If the lowest score is removed, the average jumps up to 97%. What was the lowest score on this test? To solve this problem, I'm first going to do 6 times 89%. Why am I doing that? Well, if I do 6 times 89%, you can imagine that each student, it's almost as if each student got an 89 on the test, and you can add 89 6 times to get the total score on the test. Now, in reality, each student probably did not get an 89 on this test, but this is what an average allows us to do. And what this does is, if I do 6 times 89%, I find that the total percentage sum across all of those tests is 534%. So basically, if I add up each student's score, it would sum up to 534 total percent. Now, what I'm going to do is do the same thing with a 97% average. To do this, I'm going to do 5 times 97%. And the reason I do 5 now is because I took away the lowest score. That's taking away one student's score from this data set. So now we go from 6 to 5. So 5 students average a 97 on this test. And if I do that, that ends up being 485%. How can I use this to solve the problem? Well, think about it. I just removed the lowest score from the test. When I remove the lowest score from the test, our sum goes from 534 to 485. Therefore, the lowest score is just the difference between those two sums. So let's just do 534 minus 485. And if you do that, this is equal to 49%. Therefore, the lowest score on this exam, across these 6 students at least, was a 49%. In this problem, it says that a set of 5 numbers has an average of 200. If the number 160 is removed from the data set, what is the new average? So to do this, I'm going to find what the total sum of all those 5 numbers is. To do that, I can just do 5 times 200. Because even though each number is probably not 200, their average is 200. So I can treat this like every number is 200 and multiply by 5 to find the total sum. And then 5 times 200 is 1000. What do I do now? Well, we remove the number 160 from this data set, right? So what's the new sum of all the remaining numbers? Well, just do 1000 minus 160. And if you do that, that's just 840. So now this is the new sum for the remaining numbers. And then to compute a new average, just take the new sum divided by the new number of numbers that we have. So this is just 840 divided by 4 numbers now, because I took out the number 160. Therefore, we go from 5 to 4 numbers. And then if you do 840 divided by 4, you get 210 as your new average. So think about this. This makes sense because our average was initially 200, and we removed a number that was lower than 200. So therefore, our average should go up. Let's go to the next problem. This problem says, a class of 14 students had an average of 94% on an exam. What is the lowest possible score on a single exam? Assume that 100% is the highest possible score. To solve this problem, let's find the total sum of all the scores on this exam. To do that, I can just do 14 students times an average of 94% on the exam. And if you do that, you get 1,316% is the total sum of all the percents that the student got on the test. What can I do with this number? Here's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to say 1,316% is equal to what the lowest possible score could be. Let me write that down. Lowest possible. And then the next thing I'm going to do is, let's assume that the other 13 students, let's say they got 100% on their exams. Because think about it, for one student to have the lowest possible score, everybody else should have the highest score such that they can raise the average up to a 94. So let's assume that those other 13 other students got 100%. So 13 times 100%. And then this will allow us to calculate what the lowest possible score is. Since the other 13 students got 100% on the test, they bring the average up, allowing the students to get the worst score possible. So 13 times 100 is just 1300. So 1300%. And then let's just subtract 1300 from both sides. And if you do that, 1316 minus 1300 just means that 16% is the lowest possible score that any single student could have got on this exam. This problem reads, suppose the average weight of a player in an 11-man offense in the NFL is 240 pounds. The starting O-line, consisting of 5 players, has an average weight of 300 pounds per player. What is the average weight of the remaining 6 players? Before we do this problem below, why don't you comment who your favorite team and favorite NFL player is? For me, I'm a Minnesota Vikings fan, and my favorite player is Justin Jefferson. So because of that, I'm going to do this problem in purple color. So now back to the problem. So to solve this problem, what I'm going to do is find the total weight of all the NFL players in this offense. To do that, let's just do 11 players times 240 pounds each. And if you do that, that's equal to 2,640 pounds in total. Next thing I'm going to do is subtract the weight of those O-linemen. The total weight of those O-linemen is just 5 O-linemen times 300 pounds each. And if you do that, that's 1,500 pounds in total. So then what I can do is I can subtract these quantities to find out how much weight is left over for those 6 players and then compute the average. So if I do 2,640 minus 1,500, that leaves 1,140 pounds left across those 6 remaining players. And now let me erase a bunch of this here. And now all we need to do is just 1,140 pounds across 6 remaining players. So if you do 1,140 divided by 6 and do this on a calculator, you'll find that the average weight is 190 pounds across all of those remaining 6 players. So 190 is our answer. In this problem, it says find the weighted GPA based on the table below. So here in this table, it says that a student took these 4 classes, bio, chemistry, English, and algebra 2. They were 3 credits, 3 credits, 4 credits, and 4 credits, and the grades he got were an A in bio, a B in chem, a B in English, and a C in algebra 2, which corresponds to a GPA of 4, 3, 3, and 2, respectively. And based on this, we got to find the weighted average. So to compute a weighted average, what you have to do is you have to take each value, which is our GPAs in this case, but we have to weigh them accordingly because here, some grades are worth more than others. For example, this algebra 2 class is 4 credits, which means it has more weight than a 3-credit biology class. So here's how you do a weighted average. What you do is you multiply each value, here's the GPAs, and you multiply it by its weight, which in this case is the credits. And then you add up all those weighted values. And then what you do is you divide by the weights. So let's do this. So I'm just going to go row by row. For bio, we'll have 3 credits times a GPA of 4 because they got an A, plus for chemistry is 3 credits times a 3 GPA because they got a B, plus 4 times 3 for English, plus 4 times 2 for algebra 2. And then once we have the sum of all those weighted values, you divide by the weights, in which case the weights are the credits because we're weighing this by the credits. So these are all of our weights. So just add up all the credits. 3 plus 3 plus 4 plus 4. And then now we just need to compute this expression. So 3 plus 3 plus 4 plus 4. If you do all that, you get that is equal to 14. And then let's just compute the top parts. 3 times 4 is just 12. 3 times 3 is just 9. 4 times 3 is just 12. And 4 times 2 is just 8. Oops. And then 12 plus 9 plus 12 plus 8 is just 41. Give me a bit of time to erase this. And now 41 divided by 14. Okay, this fraction is kind of massive, so let me shrink it. Here we go. 41 divided by 14. If you do that, that's just going to be about 2.93. So this is our weighted GPA. In this problem, it says that a group of kids has an average height of 55 inches. A group of teenagers that is 3 times bigger in population has an average height of 67 inches. What is the average height among all the kids and teenagers? To this problem, I'm going to fill in this table here. So it says that the children have an average height of 55 inches. And the teenagers have an average height of 67 inches. And then, even though we don't know how many kids and teens there are, we know the relative amounts of them, because we know that there's 3 times as many teens as there are kids. So I can use this to assign a weight to them so I can compute a weighted average. So because it says there's 3 times as many teens, I'm going to give them a weight of 3. And then the children will have a weight of 1 in this problem. And now we can compute a weighted average. Remember, to do a weighted average, you just do your value times the weight, and you sum all of those, and then you divide by the total amount of weight there is. So let's do that. I'm going to move down here. And all we need to do is 55 times 1 plus 67 times 3. Because there are 3 times as many teenagers, hence we put it times 3. And then we just divide that by the total amount of weight there is. Here is just 3 and 1. So 3 plus 1 is just 4. And then now we can just compute this expression. 55 times 1 is just 55. And then 67 times 3, that's just 201. And then 55 plus 201 is 256. Oops. So we have 256 inches divided by 4. And if you do that, this ends up being 64 inches. So this means the average height among all these kids and teens is 64 inches. In this problem, it says that 2 classes took the same test. In Mr. Leonard's class of 30 students, the average score was 91%. In Mrs. Shelby's class of 21 students, the average score was 78%. What was the average score across both classes? So to do this problem, we're going to have to take a weighted average because we can't just take 91 plus 78 and divide it by 2. We can't do that because the 91% happened across 30 students and the 78% happened across 21 students. So we need to account for that with a weighted average. So to do this, I'm going to do 91% times 30 students plus 78% across 21 students. And this basically gets me the total sum of all the scores across both classes. And what I can do now is just divide by how many total students there are. And that's just 30 plus 21. Let me step out for a moment. And now we can just compute this expression. 30 plus 21 is 55. 78 times 21, that's just 1638. And then 91 times 30 is just 2730. And then finally, if you add these quantities up at the top, you're going to get 4,368%. So the total sum of all the scores was 4,368% across 55 students. So to find the average, just do 4,368 divided by 55. And if you do that, you get that the answer is roughly equal to 85.6%. And that's it. That's the average score across both classes. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. Thanks for watching.